Paul and all the colleagues from the Scientific Committee for having the opportunity to be here today. And then I apologize for my Italian broken English, contrary to my partners before. They speak English very, very well. So I try to make myself understood. And I'm here today under the hat of UNEP, where UNEP has been coordinating for the last 4 years a major international project on mainstreaming ecosystem services for macroeconomic policy and land use planning. So my talk here has to do with the policy side of the story, and I'd like to briefly discuss and share with you the experience on 4 pilot countries which are listed on the slide. So this ProEcoServ, this program or project for ecosystem services, basically wants A, to be based on solid science, physical, social sciences, natural sciences, but above all, it wants to address specific policy needs. So this is the rules of the game. And there are some components where this work has been developed, including the development application of some of those decision tools and modeling. Okay? So we shape our portfolio of tools to the case study. So if you drive a Ferrari like Sebastian Vettel, when you are in Monaco Grand Prix or you are here in UK, the same car is tailored to the circuit. Second, there is a strong investment in supporting the application of these ecosystem service management approaches to international and national levels. So the idea is we need to define very clearly the scope of analysis and management, okay? And ultimately, we're going to look at the macro national scale. And the side event, which is cross-cutting, is the strength of the science policy interface. So these are the countries. We have Trinidad and Tobago, University of West Indies, Chile with this college on CIAS, which is a research institute for arid areas. We have colleagues here, Belinda from CSSR. South Africa was a pilot country as well, and Vietnam in the Camo provinces. The money came from GEF, Global Environmental Facility, and UNEP is the execution agency. And together with all these partners, we have also a strong scientific support in terms of a global steering committee, as well as each country's own steering committee, scientific steering committee, which I want to say to you is, a long story short, whatever it is said here in terms of numbers or whatsoever is based on solid science behind it. And there is also a larger community of actors that go beyond the 4 piloted countries together with the UNEP. So I want to say to you, this is a collective, integrative exercise. All in all, these are the activities that are brought in the ProEcoServ: data collection, modeling, capacity building, consensus building, dissemination. But everything is tailored to the policy needs. Okay? So basically, we come to work with a sheet completely blank, and the policymaker or the manager sets you the guidelines. So having said that, we are going to discuss briefly with you the experience we have in these 4 countries, 4 different countries, 4 different policy settings, and 4 different sets of questions for policy. In Vietnam, we're working with this teeny tiny place here at the end of the country in the south, and basically work at the subnational level, in particular with this Mui Cao National Park, Camo National Park, I never can say this correctly. And the idea is that this is an area of special interest for the country in terms of his stock and interest for biodiversity. In fact, is part of this biosphere reserve, and more recently is also part of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. And the question there was, in terms of the work, it is mainly a mangrove area, okay? And mangroves are contributing for the provision of ecosystem services, and their contribution is from a science viewpoint, is well accepted and well noted. But the idea is, how does the manager and the policymaker bring that information into stand, okay? So the first one, you want to model the quantification of the ecosystem services. And this quantification is a biophysical assessment. So there's no economics there. I want to see exactly what is the productivity and the impact of that type of land use in terms of performance for selected ecosystem services. Then there is a determination of valuation of ecosystem services, so try to enrich the first indicator with a monetary indicator, and this monetary indicator is associated with a specific beneficiaries. Is this somebody from the area? Is it a visitor to whom those services or benefits accrue to? And then linking, and this is the crucial part of the story, all the work towards development, but towards policy engagement, okay? What I want to say to you, and I apologize by all these Ferrari analogies, if you have a Ferrari, you're not going to drive the same car in the dunes of Dubai or some unpaved streets or roads from the Italian Alps. The car is very good, but is not fitted for that purpose. So the idea is that we try to fit and to calibrate the models and science and knowledge to the purpose. This is just to give an idea about the different or the changes in the land use in terms of forest in the area between 2005 and 2009, sorry, 2005 and 2010. And basically there is a sort of depletion of this habitat. It has been the transformation. We're not trying to understand the causes of it, but we try to understand what are the costs associated with changing of mangrove to an alternative land use area. And from the policy perspective, and you have to take also into account that the design of the exercise is anchored in policy. They identified 3 categories. So within the provision services, it was identified this set of services. The regulating, 2 of them, and then also from the culture they call landscape beauty. And for each of them, you have specific, solid economic valuation tools. So nothing is new here. What is new is the calibration and adaptation. I don't go into details in terms of how the computations were done. I'm happy to say to you there is a report outside that you can take at home, but you can also send me an email. It's also a version of the report. But what is important to say to you, or to say to the policymaker, is that first, there's a wide range of first, ecosystem services provided by mangrove provide a significant welfare impact. And part of them is the provisioning services. And from the economic perspective, you know this better than I, most of the time, markets are able to trace that importance. But there are other services that the market does not capture entirely its dimension, and they are also significant, which means if you, policymaker, only taking the provisioning services, most probably you're not taking into account the full range of economic benefits by mangroves. For example, for carbon sequestration and also in terms of coastal protection, it can be 4 times as much as the provisioning services. And this can be also complemented by the cultural service, in this particular case, due to the visitors, due to the national visitors to Khao Mau Park. So this is an important message to be given away. And in fact, this message has passed through the silos of science and goes contaminating in a positive way policy-making processes, including this party resolution number 24, that basically is a response to climate change and natural resource management, environmental protection, where those considerations in terms of economic significance of no market benefits provided by mangroves are brought into the picture. And this has been also extended to these 2 strategies on Vietnam for green growth and also for environmental protection 2020. So all I want to say to you is that you as a scientist, you should be double happy 2 times, or you can even be happy 3 times. But 2 times, you do a solid work, you can publish, but at the same time, this solid work is feeding a national or a regional process of decision making and supporting to make more informed decisions. And in fact, this was just this joint ministerial statement, which was it was a meeting for the region of the Mekong, which was multiple states. It was last May, this year, 2015. There was a recognition, in terms of a statement of multiple countries on the role of the mangroves and in terms of underpinning sustainable livelihoods and well-being of the people in this area. So basically, it was an interesting story that we have done there. We're now trying to move onwards, and I'll discuss this more in detail at the end of the talk. The second country is Trinidad and Tobago, and there, the calibration of our Ferrari was done according to the needs of TT. So it's a SID, small island developing state. Their interaction with the environment and their relation and the degree of importance of the environment towards the population differs. And they designed their work among three pillars. One is to look more and more into spatial explicit evaluation tools. And these spatial explicit evaluation tools will help you to facilitate policymakers in terms of analysis of alternative development options. And is also feeding the National Spatial Development Strategy that DT has been discussing so far. Also has been working introducing natural capital accounts introducing the results of natural capital accounting to national accounts. So the evaluation of the ecosystem services as a purpose in terms of feeding a statistical exercise. And then also very interesting, in my view, is always how does information can be of use in terms of designing and construction finance instruments like payments for ecosystem services. Also, an overview of what we did, or what the team has done. So they work on soil rotation. So again, the calibration and the identification of ecosystem services in accordance to the policy needs. So the north part of TT, they work mainly in forest areas and look into soil rotation services. And the idea is that forests basically mitigate soil erosion, and that mitigation can be computed in monetary and non-monetary terms, and then the values are reported in terms, for example, in terms of tax revenues. So we have an idea of importance of the service. We also work with the mangrove areas. Also, Ramsar Convention is the Neriva swamp. And there mainly the ecosystem service under scrutinization was carbon sequestration. And all in all, the carbon performance of that small area for TT is able to mitigate about, or corresponds about to 11.1% of the annual emissions. And between brackets, TT is one of the most, is an important country in terms of production oil and gas. So this amount is significant because of their emissions. If you are a gas exporter or oil exporter, the exportations amount, the carbon emissions of the exportations are accounted to your country. And very interesting is, as well, from also the economic viewpoint, has to do with the pollination services. They did some experiments how to control for wild setting pollination, and there has been coming to a computation that about 13% of the vegetable production in TT are accruable to crop pollination. So crop pollination is affecting the productivity of that agricultural sector. In Tobago, which is the other small island next to Trinidad, they work mainly with shoreline protection, and according to the team, they make some computations, and the value of the ecosystems, in this particular case, corals and coral area, in mitigating protection, mitigating coastal protection is about 313,000 USD a year per kilometer, which is quite significant. Okay? And for all of these areas, or for these policy need areas, there has been a specific tool. 5 minutes. Oh yeah, so I'm very close. And this is basically to tell to you another part of the story where some of these values are feeding into natural capital accounting. As you well know, is a process ongoing. And then I'd like to discuss with you the policy uptake. So material has been work and has been present in national planning policy, the special development strategy, national development plan. There is a context on which you work. So for the sake of speed, I'll try to talk a bit more faster, but in some places like Atacama, this was a very interesting result because Here, the work was a municipality in the remote area of Chile, very dry, and the idea is how to look into water provision ecotourism in the context of also of mining in the area. We used mainly Earth observation system for data, because there was also some scrutiny about the data. There's been using some models that were calibrated for the data and for the policy scenario, which were, in this particular case, co-decided with stakeholders. They use a software which is called Tableau. Apparently, it's common for using this kind of work. But what is important, it was a platform that fed information from Earth observation systems and was calibrated to look into different scenarios for the policymakers. And the information has been used across different stakeholders, for local community, for protecting local biodiversity, like the flamingos, and for recreationists. And for example, with this material, this São Pedro da Atacama is now a tourism development plan where ecosystems are part of the story explicitly. South Africa, I don't want to go into, I'll go to detail, but I'll also go to bed. Anyway, Belinda was coordinating this work, and in South Africa they work mainly on at the level of the district, a level of the catchment area, and also at nationally. So the project was more polyhedric from that perspective. At the local level, it basically was a story that also Belinda highlighted in terms of the role of disaster risk management through ecosystem-based approach, wildfires, droughts, among others. And the idea is there is a clear economic incentive in terms of using these tools to mitigate this kind of risk, and this can be computed in terms of financial savings from the public budget from the head district up to 160 million USD in that period of time. At catchment area, we also, there's been some work done in terms of the use of the water resource, in terms of generating power, but also in terms of irrigation. And these contributions have been studied, but not necessarily associated with the monetary value. And at the national level, it is also very important, has been done, is the recognition of the ecosystem services as an important, as playing as an important role in terms of ecological infrastructure, okay? We're not building infrastructure, but ecological infrastructure. And there is also some work in terms of water runoff, in terms of capacity for dams to produce electricity. For the policy intake, we have some work, there's some figures about creation of jobs, but also in terms of areas where this work has been present. For example, private and public partnerships has been, the work has been fed into it, including the insurance sector in the Eden district. The work has been also at a subnational level in terms of establishment of freshwater ecosystem network, and at national level we have input in terms of national development planning and disaster management amendment bill. So the idea is, and to conclude, there were material which is sufficiently interesting and of added value in terms of science, but the same, with some examples here, but at the same time, this material is also being used and fed important, relevant, significant policy process. So this is important to take into account all the time, despite you are born as a scientist. This is just a recent work by Steiner that we did on Time magazine with a highlight of the work. And then it's about next, and there's something I like to live with Paul and with the colleagues about to maximize the impact and the visibility. So the graph is all full. We need to go more and more bringing this work towards significant policy-relevant exercise, and now we have the SDGs. And I think we have to work at is a current follow-up plan. For example, as Steve said, in 1 minute, is the one before the last. All this thing about pilot is very good, but it's like a relationship. Sooner or later, you have to have a commitment, you have a marriage, you know? You cannot be the fiancé forever, unless you are Peter Pan. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is you need to move and have it at mainstream. So you look at into the exercise as business as usual, and not some more. And these some thoughts I'd like to share with you. And the next slide, and I'll conclude, has to do with partnerships, okay? Most of the things cannot be done alone. UNEP cannot do this alone. ESPA cannot do this alone. So we need to somehow think strategically together and upscale towards our findings to a larger scale. And I thank you for your time, and I hope I was somehow in time.
Well, thank you very much, Paulo. Well, I've got family roots in Trinidad, and so I know that all those subjects you picked up there, Northern Range, what it does for the soil, the coral reef, what it does for the coast, are very contentious issues, and I'm assuming you've now put some good facts and figures, which will then move you to, as you've said there, how do you spend your green fund from oil? So it looks quite policy relevant to me. But anyway, questions, thoughts from the audience? Yes, Sam.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sam Mwangi. I'm the Regional Evidence Advisor for ESPA in Africa.
Okay.
And I think I would like to relate the presentation from PIMA in Tanzania with what you're doing and the problem of elite capture. And unfortunately, a lot of what has been happening usually ends up, and I think Catherine touched a bit on it, the people who are involved in the project basically are the ones who benefit. And I think for ESPA and largely for African governments and policymakers, the question is how can we integrate equity in this kind of thing? And I would like to subsequently ask you if we are going to have a design of projects that are driven by science for development, what probably would be the one or two key messages that you've seen coming up, especially because you're orienting your work towards policy? Basically, that's what I would like to know.
Thanks, Sam.
Hi there, I'm Dario Kenner, independent researcher, and I run a website, Why Green Economy. My question relates to the study that was being done in Vietnam on the mangroves. And just to pick up on a comment that you said, and to ask you why it's the case, you said that you were not trying to understand the cause of the depletion of the mangrove. You were trying to measure the costs of its destruction. And surely to try and stop the destruction of the mangrove, you'd need to look into why it was happening, and that should be the focus.
Thank you. One more. Here we go. Belinda.
It was just to follow on from Sam's comment. I think that obviously it's only 15 minutes to reflect on a wide diversity of impacts, but I think part of the learning in ProEcoServ was also about the impact pathway and the different kinds of impacts, from the new knowledge that Paulo was referring to shifts in investments, to shifts in policy and actual outcomes as well, which was, maybe Paulo, you could just reflect a bit on some of that thinking too.
Okay. So from the beginning, well, the question that you pose regarding about who is involved, because well beyond what we were being targeting in this project, so I can give you what I think about it. Economists think about two major points: efficiency and equity. So efficiency, how much larger is your pizza? Efficiency, how many slides each of us have? And most of the discourse in the beginning has to do with efficiency, maximization. But it has been said now, more and more, the equity issues are important. So it is very of ultimate importance to understand not only, and bringing the question to you, what is the range and the magnitude of the ecosystem service, but to whom these ecosystem services are accruing. Because most of the times, especially in the context of developing countries, the most vulnerable populations are the ones for whom the ecosystem services are the most important. They call the GDP of the poor. I don't like that expression, but the idea is the contribution of ecosystems for the GDP is much higher than for the other ones. So this should be highlighted in the construction of the process. You talk about work driven by science, so I would like to have the freedom to disagree with you. The idea is that the work should be driven for policymakers, and it should be solid from a science viewpoint. But you need to listen to him or to her in terms of the questions and the timings, and you should bring something to him. If I say two important things, so first is to be humbled, and before that, to listen. Just to listen, not to be arrogant and coming there, but this is very personal. So be humbled and be listening, so it provides something, and be confident with what we say, taking into account those two restrictions. But it is Paulo. Huh? So the question about cost and stop and degradation. Maybe I was not very clear in my expose. I don't want, the project didn't want to understand if mangroves are lost to commercial development or urban development whatsoever. What the project want to understand is that most probably any cost-benefit analysis that was underlying that decision, the costs part or the foregone benefits of the mangroves were undervalued. So the idea is just to give some idea about the full range of benefits associated with mangroves. So basically, the tip of the iceberg is more than the iceberg itself. So this is what I want to say about that comment. The last one is about Melinda. Belinda, I think what you say, I mean, I could not agree more with you. But what is missing here is a scientific pedigree that until now is very often, not so often to find. We'll have those persons who move away a bit from their comfort zone and take the challenge in bringing their knowledge of added value to something also. I mean, in terms of understanding how can you be useful in terms of bringing your work closer to the policymaker. And there is no recipe for that. I mean, there is no recipe for that. Naturally, I think that it is not it's not business as usual today. So the work you did, for example, in the Eden district, it's very valuable, but you don't find this very often elsewhere. So, and this comes to my story of the pilot being the business as usual. I mean, we need to make a step further and have this kind of discussions on regular basis, where not Mr. Pink, Mr. L does these things is isolated, but there is a sort of community doing these things on regular basis.
Thank you very much, Paulo.